The U.S. Department of Energy is cleaning up the Oak Ridge Reservation of residual hazardous and radioactive contamination left over as a result of decades of nuclear energy research. Much of that work has been influenced by the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup operations. You're welcome to attend the meetings and be part of this important work. For more information, call us or visit our website.
The May the 11th, 2022 advisory board meeting. First, we'll go straight into the comments from our federal and state agencies. I believe Mr. Alan Stokes is on tonight. Mr. Stokes, would you have any comments for the board?
Leon, I was going to give comments for DOE tonight.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Miss Melissa, you want to go ahead and go forward?
No problem. I didn't want to put Alan on the spot.
No.
Good evening. We're thankful for your attendance and time tonight, and we're excited to pass along some new information. Since our last meeting, ORM has received another very strong budget from Congress for the 2022 $630 million. That figure includes a funding increase of about $15 million from previous years for our cleanup at Y12 and ORNL, and this keeps us going strong at these sites. Also, we've begun demolition on building 9213 at the Y12 National Security Complex. That facility is a high-risk excess contaminated facility, and it marks another big step forward for our program at Y12, where we're continuing to eliminate risk and transform that site. We are excited to announce that OREM is starting a monthly newscast to increase awareness about our progress and reach the public in new ways. The first episode airs on community television, that's CTV in Knoxville and Channel 12 on May 22nd, and it will be available online the next day. This program also provides us an opportunity to spotlight this board and the outstanding people who serve it. You will be seeing some familiar faces in the future episodes. We've saved the biggest update for last, and it's related to tonight's presentation topic. We've reached agreement with TDEC and EPA on several notable topics related to the EMDF project. This will allow us to move forward with a public comment period and follow-up public comment period on the latest details surrounding the EMDF project. The public comment period started May 9th and will continue through June 7th. The public comment is scheduled for May 17th at the Pollard Auditorium here in Oak Ridge. We encourage you to attend to hear some of the latest on those efforts. We have a special website set up to share all the information about this, which I will have Shelley and Sarah share with you after the meeting. Thank you again for your attendance tonight. We're looking forward to sharing the latest on this important topic and hearing your thoughts. With that, I'll return it back to Leon.
Thank you, Ms. Melissa. Ms. Foster, you have anything from EPA?
Yes, I'm Samantha Urquhart Foster from EPA. We're just excited to be able to be a part of the public meeting that's coming up on next week, and grateful that we've been able to work with DOE and TDEC to come to agreement on a lot of the things that were outstanding. Anyway, I'm just grateful to be here, and I'm looking forward to meeting some of you guys at a public meeting next week.
Thank you so much for attending. Christoph, you have anything with TDEC?
Good afternoon. The only thing here I would like to mention is that we have that public comment period that started on EMDF. We are working with UCOR and DOE to resolve some issues because apparently some links to some supporting information was not working. I think this was resolved, but if any of you has a problem with accessing some of the information, we're on the top of it with DOE trying to resolve it.
Thank you, Christoph. Agenda item number 3, we'll go into the presentation of the EMDF for the waste disposal. We have several of our board members that's on this issue group. Jones and Lohman, McCurdy, Perez, Shields, Shoemaker, Swindler, and Tapp. Tonight, our presentation is from Dennis Mayton. We'd like to thank Dennis for being here tonight. A little bit about Dennis's background. He's a senior project manager for proposed new environmental management disposal facility Landfill. and existing landfills for the Oak Ridge Environmental Management Office. Mr. Mayton previously managed the groundwater program as project manager, and he's been with DOE since 2015. Prior to his time with DOE, he was an environmental restoration manager at the Holston Army Ammunition Plant in Kingsport, Tennessee for 3 years. And before that, he worked with 10 years managing the environmental cleanup and engineering geology projects for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He's also worked for a private industry working circular cleanup projects at Army sites. And Dennis has a bachelor's degree in geology from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where he's also in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years. So, Mr. Mayton, thank you so much for attending tonight and presenting a very valuable topic to us. And I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much. Just like to start with saying I'm happy to be here tonight to give the board an update on OREM's effort to make sure we have enough disposal space for OREM's ongoing cleanup work. Past couple of years, Brian Henry gave this presentation. This year's presentation is similar, but been updated with new information. Again, I currently work under Brian as the deputy for the new proposed landfill and the project manager for the existing landfills. And when I get done with the presentation, Brian is also on the call tonight in case anyone wants to ask him any questions also. Next slide, please. Okay, DOE has several landfills on the reservations that we use and operate. We have done a lot of cleanup work in the past, and we still have a lot of work in the future. So we are always having to evaluate how much more landfill space we will need and start planning for expansion a long time before the space isn't needed. In addition to our cleanup waste, we also take items from ORNL and Y12 at our sanitary landfills. We have landfills that are permitted by TDEC, and I'll point those out on an aerial photograph later in the presentation. And DOE has a low-level radioactive waste disposal facility called the Environmental Management Waste Management Facility, or EMWF, as I'll refer to in the rest of this presentation. And that one is operated under CERCLA, which has oversight by TDEC and EPA. However, it's already about 82% full now. So now that OREM has moved its cleanup focus to ORNL and Y12, additional disposal capacity is needed to have the same success at those areas as OREM had at the East Tennessee Technology Park. The new proposed landfill for the additional CERCLA waste is referred to as the Environmental Management Disposal Facility, or EMDF. Each disposal facility has approved acceptance criteria to determine whether waste is acceptable for disposal. Next slide, please. Across the complex, we need multiple paths to dispose of waste to be successful. This includes both on-site and off-site, but most of the volume is disposed on-site. Our preference is to use items for other beneficial use if possible, and this route also doesn't take up landfill space. So our first option is we try to reuse or recycle so there is no waste. The next option is to dispose of this waste in our sanitary landfills. And then the next preference is the CERCLA landfills. And finally, if we don't have a path at any of those, then it has to go off-site, mainly out west. We currently operate 3 non-CERCLA landfills. The first one I'll mention is Landfill 4, which handles classified sanitary waste. It's much smaller than the other landfills. Landfill 5 is sanitary waste, and it's similar to Landfill 4. Although it doesn't take classified waste. Also, it does take some office and cafeteria items from ORNL, and it's permitted for about 2.2 million cubic yards. Landfill 7 takes construction debris, and all of these permitted landfills I just mentioned there are permitted by TDEC, and they have regular inspections. The next option there, the CERCLA EMWF, takes items that can't be accepted at the sanitary landfills or recycled, but it also has to be generated as part of our circular work here. The new landfill that is proposed that we're working on getting approval for will be very similar to EMWF in that it will be for circular waste also. and it's for low radiological and or chemical contaminated soil and demo debris and equipment. Last, items that don't meet the criteria for any of those landfills, as I mentioned before, has to go off-site. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier on, most of the waste volume stays on site. By volume, approximately about 95% stays on the site and 5% goes off-site. However, in terms of radioactivity and the hazard, the majority of the radioactivity goes off-site. In fact, it's nearly 100%, as the pie chart there on the right shows. And the large volume that stays on site is mostly the concrete, steel, and soil from our cleanup projects. Similar to MWolf at EMDF, the majority of the volume will be disposed on site, but relatively small inventories of higher radioactivity from cleanup will need to be shipped off site. And of that radioactivity, the majority will be from the O&L project cleanup waste. Next slide, please. I think most of you are well aware of the reservation here, but this is just a figure to kind of show you the three main sites and then also the location of the landfills on the site. The reservation is a little over 30,000 acres. Again, on the west side there is ETTP. Down on kind of on the south side is O&L, and then kind of on the northeast side there you see Y12. But the main thing here is kind of show the location of the landfills here. As you can see, MWolf is just a little bit to the west of the main Y12 complex, and the proposed site for EMDF is about 2 miles on down Bethel Valley from there. And then the other landfills are just kind of on the south side, and there on the next figure, there'll be another aerial photograph showing a close-up of the landfills. So next slide, please. Okay, again, this shows a close-up of the landfills. The complex that you see there is Y12. Not sure how the color is showing up on everybody's screen, but the color that's kind of more the light gray, that's our landfills that are currently operational that I talked about before. Again, there on the left, there's the MWolf, which is the circle landfill. And then to 4, 5, and 7, again, are our active permitted landfills. And then there's also kind of in a bluish color there are the ones more to the south there that are our closed landfills that's been closed for several years. Also mention that on the reservation, we have roads that are dedicated there to take the waste to these landfills, and sometimes you'll hear them referred to as haul roads. And those are very important because they allow us to dispose of the waste in our landfills without taking the waste out onto the public highway. And then another thing I mentioned here is, again, as I mentioned, a lot of the remaining waste will be coming from the Y12 area. So these landfills are very close so it requires a very short distance to get the waste to the landfills. Next slide, please. Okay, these are 2 photos of the East Tennessee Technology Park, and it kind of shows the success that we had at ETTP. Basically, all the buildings in the upper left photo are gone, as you can see from the bottom right photograph. Some of the buildings were kept that didn't need to be demoed, and those have largely been turned over to the public sector for use. Again, we've been very successful out here because of the landfills that we have that help to speed up the work, and that's helped to allow a lot of new industries to come in and use the East Tennessee Technology Park that wouldn't have been possible as quickly if we didn't have the existing landfills. We do have, though, at ETTP, some soil cleanup that's in groundwater that's still remaining. So we still do have a little bit of soil that's going to MWolf and the other. And again, now that we've completed the demo there, those crews and the quality workforce that we have there have been transitioning over to do work at Y12 and O&L now. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a slide showing the buildings that are currently planned for demo at Y12 and O&L. With Y12 being there on the left side and O&L on the right. Again, this is where our work is concentrated at now. The Y12 has fewer buildings than the O&L, but they're much larger complexes, so they'll actually take up about 2/3 of the space that we need in the new landfill, whereas at O&L, there's a lot much or more buildings that are smaller, and they'll take up about 1/3 of our planned capacity in the new landfill. The new landfill, the preliminary design, we don't have a preliminary design yet, but that we're working on will be based on 4 cells and built. The first 2 will be probably built first once we get approval, and then we'll have the additional cells to build as we need more space. One thing to point out too on the photo here, as you can see, the Y12 and O&L are both in valleys. The green area you see are up on the ridges, so it's very important to the DOE's mission to get these buildings demoed so that we have space to build new buildings to continue the mission of Y12 and O&L. Next slide, please. Okay, often I think Karen Thompson often gives you a briefing on the budget, but I did want to give one slide here because the pace of cleanup and the pace of waste generated is highly dependent on the budget that ORM receives each year. And Oak Ridge has been fortunate to receive favorable funding, especially over the last 5 years, which has enabled ORM to move from the ETTP area to get it cleaned up and now move over to Y12 and O&L. Again, the blue part of this funding graph that you see, that's the defense funding, and that's the funding that we get to use for cleanup for Y12 and O&L, which, as you can see from this graph, has increased very well over the past several years. And then the top gray that you see in this graph, that's the particular funding that we use at ETTP. As you can see, it's went down, but that's what we would see now that we got the buildings demoed at the site and just have the soil. So again, when you're doing cleanup work, that's where you eventually want to get to, is where you've cleaned up and moving on to other areas. Next slide, please. Okay, we're actually in the 20th year of operating our existing circular landfill, MWolf, which again is very similar to the proposed landfill, EMDF. In fact, it was May back in 2002 when we started operations of MWolf, and it has been key to our success at ETTP and the cleanup work here at Oak Ridge. It does have waste from all 3 sites, but the vast majority that has been disposed there did come from ETTP, and the existing landfill has a capacity of 2.3 million cubic yards, and it's about 82% filled at this time. The original capacity was about 2.2 million cubic yards, but we got approval a couple of years ago to change the design for the final cap, which gave us an additional space of about 100,000 cubic yards. At our current planned disposal rate, we expect to be filled by the late 2020s. But again, this is dependent on budget. Our current schedule for EMDF would have it operational by late 2020s, though. In addition, the regulators, and part of our agreement for the D2 rod that's going to be submitted, is there's an agreement to do a groundwater field demonstration for the new landfill. And so that added a couple of years to the completion to get us ready for the new landfill. The existing MWolf that you see in the photo here, it's designed with 6 cells, and the cell 1 is the furthest away in this photo, and cell 6 is the one that we're just starting to get ready to use for waste disposal. And again, the new landfill is the preliminary plans is for it to have 4 cells, but still it'll be 2.2 million cubic yards. Give you a little bit of idea how much waste we dispose. In 2021, we disposed of about 65,000 cubic yards at MWolf last year. About 9,000 of that was the soil from various cleanups. And in the 2 years prior to that, we averaged about 75,000 cubic yards each year. Next photo, please. All right, the focus of our work now, again, as I've mentioned before, is at Y12 and O&L. When doing deactivation and demolishing a building, the majority of time and costs is associated with cleaning out a building and getting ready for demo. The large buildings at Y12 will take us several years to characterize and clean out and get ready for demo. So we do have some time to get ready for demo, but we will need EMDF ready so that we can dispose of the demo debris in the future. Also, as the sanitary landfills, we're also working at expanding landfill 5. Also, it's permitted to at about 2 million cubic yards. We have not built all that out yet, but we're starting work on that later this year. And so we'll add another 460,000 cubic yards, probably about airspace for it that'll be available in 2023. And again, though, we do need additional circle landfill space. So that's why we need EMDF. And again, it'll be very similar to MWolf in size between. And we're still working on that regulatory approval. We sent the D1 rod last July for EMDF. And just simply D1 simply refers to the FFA terminology for the first version of a document that we send to the regulators to review and give us comments on, And D2 will be the version that'll be going out in the next couple of months. And that's the version after we've made changes to the document based on comments and meetings that we have with the regulators in between the two documents. And again, we expect to submit that probably in the latter part of July. And we hope to have the new landfill operational by 2029. Next slide, please. Okay, there are multiple layers of protection that are made up of planning, design, construction, and operation of the landfills that we have here to ensure that they're safe. And then the circle landfills even have additional requirements. Early on, when we do a landfill, we evaluate multiple sites to determine the best location that meets the need. And this includes doing a lot of characterization. For example, EMDF, we installed about 32 piezometers to monitor the water levels at the site. And then we designed to meet Class C, Rector Class C landfill standards. And during the construction, there's a lot of quality assurance and quality control goes on, not only by our contractor, but also oversight by DOE during the constructions. And under DOE regulations, we also have to evaluate the performance before we get approval to build a new landfill. And then before it ever goes operational, we also have to go through another approval authority under DOE regulations. And waste that doesn't meet our waste acceptance criteria is not allowed to go into any of the landfills. And so we go through an extensive characterization that's approved by EPA and TDEC on the buildings that we're demoing. And as a circle landfill, these landfills also, MWolf and EMDF in the future would have to go through CERCLA 5-year reviews. And so and they also have a lot of monitoring and controls that occur. So there'll be monitoring wells installed to evaluate the site, or not evaluate, but to monitor it in the future. Next slide, please. Okay, throughout this process, we've had multiple public meetings on the new landfill. The public comment period and meetings for the proposed plan occurred back in the late 2018, early 2019. The comment period was actually extended longer than required. We went beyond 30 days, actually up to 120 days for that comment period. And all the comments and responses that we received then was included in the D1 ROD that was issued last July. Some of the main concerns for both TDEC and the public were the groundwater levels and site characterization, the waste acceptance criteria, mercury disposal, and discharge limits. And as Melissa mentioned earlier, there's another public comment period that just started this week, and it runs up to June 7th. And there's a public meeting next week for May 17th. And that meeting next week, we'll talk about the groundwater field demonstration, the characterization, the WAC, and the discharge limits. And we had several sessions along the way also in this process. Next slide, please. Okay, to build a new landfill, multiple regulatory approvals have to be attained first. DOE is self-regulatory through various orders, through an order known as 435-1. And the first approval that we have to get is what's known as a preliminary disposal authorization. And this has to be attained before we build the landfill, and eventually before we dispose, we have to get an operational DAS. And also we have to go through the circular process, which I spoke about a few minutes ago on the public comment period. And after that, the D2 rod will be submitted for the regulators to approve before we can continue with the landfill. And also, before we submit that rod, we'll be submitting a revised focus feasibility study, which will include the discharge limits that was part of the discharge decision by EPA. And I believe that's the last slide, but so again, as I mentioned, Brian Henry's here, and also Roger Petrie. Most of you remember Dave Atler. He retired back in March. So Roger's kind of the new face here for any questions that you normally would have been asking for Dave, but we'll be glad to, any of the three of us, to take any questions that you have now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayton. If someone has a question that's a actual board member or one of the TDEC staff, please raise your hand. And we'll just call on you there as you raise your hand. Christoph, you want to go first?
Yes, I would like to have a clarification from Dennis. I think I heard Dennis saying that it was the delay to the new facility due to the regulator's insistence on groundwater demonstration. My recollection is that the state of Tennessee was concerned with the proximity to the groundwater, and the state of Tennessee was proposing elevation of the facility. And the groundwater study was proposed, the groundwater demonstration was proposed by DOE. So if Dennis can address this one, I would appreciate it.
I'll probably, if Brian was kind of involved when that was first decision was made. So Brian, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'll let you answer that one if that's okay.
Sure. No, you're correct. You're correct, Christoph. As part of the discussion on moving the project forward, the state did have concerns about the groundwater levels and proposed elevating the facility over the current levels. DOE felt like that was not particularly feasible, and working together, we came up with the idea. DOE proposed it, and we agreed that we could move forward using a groundwater field demonstration. I think Dennis's point was, factoring that in will add some time to the schedule, but your assessment was correct.
Thank you for this clarification. I appreciate.
Does anyone have their hands up for a question? As board members, scanning through, I see none. Are there any guests that's in attendance tonight that has a question for the presenter, Mr. Mayton? Mr. Jones.
Yeah, this is just a comment. I sent out an email, really just had time right before the meeting, where I'm taking issue again with DOE's claim that almost all the radioactivity was sent off site. And I won't say too much, but I just sent you a demonstration, a little calculation, like Brian Henry can remember I was always doing in my head during our meetings, that looks at how much cesium was probably put in one single waste lot, about probably 200 curies. And the typical inventory in DOE documents for all of EMWMF is about 600 curies. Of course, all those estimates are crude, and the first table that I give you is not something that's publicly available, and you'd have to go to DOE or TDEC to get the full waste profile document, because I don't have it anymore. I just had the characterization data saved. But anyway, I just want DOE to straighten out what they're talking about. In DOE's defense, at least in the project team meetings where I was in, on K25, K27, there was some effort to send a lot of uranium out west. And uranium, as a heavy metal, may pose more of a hazard long-term than a lot of the radioactive isotopes that are shorter half-life, like cesium-137. So this is just technical nerd stuff, trying to get DOE to figure out what radioactivity really means. That's all.
Anyone else have any questions or comments by raising their hand? Guests or board members? All right, thank you, Mr. Mayton. Thank you, Brian.
1 second, Leon. I believe Harriet has a question.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry about that, Miss Harriet. I didn't see your hand. Go ahead, Miss Harriet.
First, I have to unmute. I was slow coming to it, Leon. My apologies.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Just a quick explanation of how the decision is made that they have enough space in the proposed new landfill to do the job. What kind of, do they measure building masses? How do they come up with numbers and space connections to know that they have something that's reasonable?
Yes, we have again, on that one photo where I had the different colors of the buildings that to be disposed of. So we use that as a good starting point for the amount of space that those buildings will use up that we will need in the new landfill. But there is a contingency built into the volume that we're planning for the landfill in case additional buildings get added on, because we definitely don't want to get to the end and realize we needed a little bit more space. So there is some contingency built in there. And I think, as I mentioned before, the plan is to probably build the first 2 cells of the landfill first, which will be a little bit less than half of the available capacity for the landfill, so that when we get to the end, if we don't need that additional contingency space, we simply wouldn't have to build all 4 cells that are planned for the landfill. And Brian, I'll let you, if you want to add anything to that.
Sure. So we do what we call a waste generation forecast that's constantly being revised, looking at the buildings that remain, looking at the historical buildings to update to forecast how much capacity is needed. We also look at risk to that estimate on additional waste that could be going there, or in some cases waste that might be less than estimated. And that's where Dennis alluded to that 25% contingency number. So we continually look at that. We have a high degree of confidence that 2.2 million will get all of the remaining circular waste for the cleanup of Y12 and ORNL. And as Dennis alluded to, if we wind up needing less space, then we simply wouldn't build the 4th cell.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Harriet. One more call for any questions or comments to the presenters before we release them out. Not seeing none. Gentlemen, we really appreciate you taking your time tonight. We're going to go ahead and move forward with the board business, so you're free to go if you'd wish. You can stay if you'd like as well. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll go into public comment. Ms. Shelley, do you have anybody down for public comment tonight yet?
I do not, and no one has sent me any messages. So just for that notice, we will continue to accept public comment until next Monday, 5 p.m. if anyone here wants to follow up.
Thank you. We'll call for any additions or motions to approve the agenda. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Tapp makes a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Let Ms. Shelley take the count.
All right, I see a majority in favor.
Good deal. Under subsection A there, request for new action items. If anyone's got any comments, we can bring that up. And we'll also discuss the next meeting for June the 8th for the groundwater remedies. The issue group for that is Jones, Loman, McCurdy, Samara, Shields, Shoemaker, Swidler, and Tapp. In the past, we have been trying to start an email trend with the board members that are participating in the issue group. So please continue to do that. some great feedback, and it also keeps the actual board business kind of on topic with the agenda and keeps us moving forward. So if you have any questions or comments, I'm on that board as well as some of the other veteran members, please reach out. And for the new members, if you'd like to participate in some of that, your name's not on one of the issue groups, please feel free to contact Shelley, and Shelley will bring you into the link on that. Anything else on request for new action items? Okay, this ends the presentation portion of the meeting. We'll go straight into the board meeting. Budget recommendations update. Ms. Shelley, you want to comment on that, or you want me to try to, Miss Melissa, either one of you?
I just meant that if the board members that are here, since we weren't able to meet last month, want to discuss the budget proposal, the issue group has made a draft. And while we cannot vote on it until the stewardship meeting later this month, y'all are free to discuss it if you so desire.
I will open the floor for any discussion from the active board members on the budget.
I've been out of pocket this week, so I haven't looked at the full packet. Do we have a draft of the recommendation in the packet at this point, or no?
You should, and if not, if it didn't come through, I can always send that out, but also I can pop that up on the screen right now. The big difference that the issue group has made was the recommendation was basically carried over from last year. Just the priorities here were reordered in order of importance that was slightly different, regarding the first priority to be the aquatic ecology laboratory, the second to be the on-site disposal facility that we're discussing tonight, the third to be any excess funds to go to speed up construction of the mercury treatment facility, adequate funds to maintain or upgrade infrastructure in general, and then lastly to complete transfers of land at ETTP to the community.
And these are in rank order, so to speak.
Correct.
Yeah, that was the big change for the group this year. Last year, it was just, here are our 5 recommendations, and the group wanted to order it. So most important to least important. So if funding was not available, they would know which we felt was more important to us.
Well, I don't think that was in the packet. I went through the entire packet. I didn't find it in mine, unless I just overlooked it.
It's possible it did not make it in there. I can always send it out directly after the meeting. It will definitely be in the EM stewardship packet.
Any other questions or comments for anything pertaining to the budget request?
The only thing that I would make from a comment perspective is that I can definitely appreciate the desire to want to increase the funding for the aquatic ecology lab. However, that's a smaller scale intervention than increasing funding or escalating the timeline for the mercury treatment facility. So that would be my only comment. It's not objective, just a comment for consideration.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, this is Tom Tuck. In view of Shell's observation and in view of the document here, does that warrant a little more discussion, possibly an answer to her observation?
I think if I'm correct, Shelley, correct me. I think that the recommendations can be edited. Have they officially already been submitted yet?
They have not been submitted. The recommendation has to be voted out of the EM Stewardship Committee. And because we were not able to meet last month, that has not occurred. So we are free to edit the recommendation now or at the stewardship level in 2 weeks.
What the board may want to do is following Ms. Shelley's resend of this for the board members to revisit it, bring it up in a topic issue group with an email trend, so that way we can edit that out of any possible requests before the stewardship meeting at the end of the month. If there's language, go ahead.
Oh, I can say, so this rank order, this was our first draft. We still haven't had any sort of conversation on how we want that ordered. So this was just my first draft at it. We have not had a full budget meeting on how we want it actually ordered. So I just want to let you know that actually ordering hasn't really taken place yet. This was just my first run at it.
Great. Michael, you've kind of led that in the past in the issue group. Do you mind trying to resurface that email trend of those different participants and try to live that down a little bit more?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping we would be able to hang on at the end of this meeting and maybe talk it out. But if not, then I will start that email chain up again.
Okay.
I can actually respond to everyone, Michael. And I'll include this with the notations here that there was some commentary at this meeting, because I don't think that all of our issue group members are here, although several of you are.
Yeah, I'm happy to entertain either way, Michael. I think we've had possible some viable input from the other people that may not be here. So we may just want to go back to the issue group and make sure we let all participate into that feedback, and the additional members that want to and kind of log in and help us on that.
Yep, no problem. I was hoping for good attendance tonight.
To all the board members, if you're not on the issue group of the budget and you would like to participate in this conversation, if you will, just tell Ms. Shelley, so that way we can make sure and add you in the email trend of this discussion. Any further questions? Okay. Everyone should have received the minutes in their packets sent out. Do we have any kind of amendments to it, or do we have a motion to approve as sent out?
Actually, Leon, if we have amendments to the minutes, I'm happy to entertain those, but we are actually short of a quorum tonight, so we should not vote to approve these minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'll move forward to the next topic. Responses to recommendations, and offer Ms. Melissa.
Good evening. I think I unmuted and this time left my video on. I may have cut it off when I did my original comments, so I apologize for that. I just wanted to let everybody know that we have our draft membership package at headquarters for its initial review. So we'll be working through that process. I understand from talking to Shelley that there's a couple other packages that are in front of us, so it might take a while to get the initial draft package done. Once we get the draft package back, then we're able to go forward and submit it formally, and then it goes through the typical process, which is a very long process, but at least we are working on the first stage. I also wanted to talk to you about the fact that we are going to be scheduling our annual planning meeting. Right now, we're looking at Saturday, August 13th in Townsend. You will get more specific details in the next few weeks. Shelley and Sarah will be sending out information as well as questions on if you want to do a dinner the night before and that type of thing. So, stay tuned on that. The other thing I wanted to update you on is we're in the process of updating the DOE Information Center to be able to allow us to have hybrid meetings in the future. We had actually hoped to have that installed by this meeting, but supply issues have become a little bit of an issue, and we've not gotten all the equipment that we need to get a fully up and running, be able to do video chats with people. We are hoping that will be ready by June 8th, and we'd be able to do a hybrid meeting. But if that ends up, if we don't get some of the key components, we may have to do the June meeting virtual as well. So we will keep you updated on that as we move forward. And that's all I have, Leon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Melissa. We'll go into the EM stewardship the committee reports. Ms. Bonnie's not here tonight, so we'll table that till when she can come back and give us that briefing. The executive committee report on the Paducah chairs meeting recap. Two things I'll cover: the waste management and the Paducah. The chairs meeting really had a lot of feedback from the 8 chairs across the country. And Ms. Kelly Jones was there to speak on behalf of a lot of the issues that we had addressed in the previous chairs meetings, as far as membership packets get renewed. They have changed some of the protocols that they may do to accommodate the existing board members that already currently have the DOE approval, but just kind of in the transition of getting renewed. I think that gave them some variance leeway that the local site managers and the officials can do to try to assist in some of that gap. A lot of feedback from headquarters as far as some of the upcoming changes, the staff, the support. It's a very good chairs meeting. Of course, Paducah, a lot of you may know, it's one of the 3 gaseous diffusion plants in the country, other than Oak Ridge, ETTP, and Portsmouth. So it's really something to make sure you look into, study up on the history on. Very knowledgeable meeting, but the chairs come together with pretty much the same ideals. We all kind of face the same issues as far as membership recruitment, the membership packages, of course. And it's surprising, and it's most appreciative of truly learning what the local DOE staff does for the citizens advisory boards. And when you start seeing all the boards to come together, you really see what your local groups at home, like Miss Melissa, Miss Shelley, Miss Sarah, actually does for us. So I want to pass our appreciation as a board to them, because they do more than what we know behind the scenes. A couple of great ideas as far as membership recruitment, of going out into the community, trying to target certain things. Some advisory board members are tasked with trying to find a replacement for them once they mature off as far as their tenure and retire from the board, of helping them fit the board with a proper member that can kind of take the torch and continue that run. So a lot of good feedback in the chairs meetings as far as learning what the other labs do, some of their experiences, what they've learned on the advisory commission, and just a great meeting. The waste management, I'll keep it brief. The Oak Ridge site, as I've spoke many times, is always on a national level as far as recognition. One day exclusively was nothing but the success stories of ETTP, Y12, and ORNL. And so it's always a proud moment when you walk in as an ORSA member to a national meeting, and you're seeing the great strides that Oak Ridge does, and they recognize you. Oh, you're from Oak Ridge. So, you know, it's always great. And I encourage the other members on the board to try to participate in some of those conferences and learning experience in some of those meetings, because that's really where a lot of the knowledge to come back and help on the local level starts. Additions to the agenda or closing remarks. Thank you again for being here tonight. I'll open the floor if there's any additions or any kind of closing remarks from anybody before we call for a motion to adjourn. I'll call one more last time if anyone has anything to bring before the commission. Unless Miss Melissa or Miss Shelley has anything, do we have a motion on the floor to adjourn?
Motion.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Thank you, everyone, for a good night. We'll see you in the EM stewardship meeting. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you.